Hello, students. It's good to see you once again. So, let's continue from where we left in the last session. In the last session, we were talking about Gayatri Chakraborty's Vivek and what she said in Can the Subaltern Speak? Today, we shall take a little detour from there and talk a bit about Sukumar Rai and his importance in the Bengal Renaissance. You see, Shipley suggests something very interesting about um nonsense literature. Shipley suggests that in an absurd universe without belief, there are no ethical standards, no moral judgment, no perception of valid motives. One thing or one action is as good as another. So you see, basically, this acts as a very potent instrument, a very potent tool for writing back when, especially, you are thinking in terms of the empire. Basically, then some of you might question that why isn't Roy talking about surrealism? What is surrealism? Surrealism is what we might call super realism. It's a form of art, it's a form of thought where you break off the signifiers. That is where you break off the very nature of the things that we are talking about. For instance, imagine when you think of a clock, you think of it in terms of solid, that is, it shows time. But imagine a landscape, a very arid landscape where clocks are melting and hanging from trees. No, I'm not talking something gibberish. I'm talking about one very famous painting, which can be called one of the most iconic paintings of surrealism. The painting is by Salvador Dali, and the name of the painting is the persistence of memory. So that is a very interesting painting because here Dali kind of undoes, he kind of unravels, he kind of rips apart the very nature, the very kind of signifiers that we use. What is a signifier? For instance, if I say that this is a book, if I say that this is a book, then the word book is the signifier and the object that I just showed is a signified. Okay. Now, according to structuralism, which is a linguistic theory which talks about the relationship between the interrelationship between signifier and signified, according to structuralism, there is no inherent relationship between the signifier and the signified, and whatever relationship we might develop is habitual. That is, we have been habituated through generations in talking about the signified in those terms of the signifier. So signified is what is uttered, written, or gestured, and signified is the object to which the signifier refers to. Now, surrealism. So why does not Sukumar Rai revert to surrealism? Basically, surrealism turns away from life, but the absurd is a reflection of life. This is also something which Shipley says. Why does surrealism turn away from life? Because you see, Roland Barthes, in one of his major essays, The Death of the Author, in that essay, Roland Barthes suggests that surrealism made a cardinal mistake. And what was that mistake? That is, surrealism tried to destroy the signifier, to destroy the sign rather. That is basically a sign or a mark is anything, any word, gesture, posture, whatever you might think of, that is a sign. So, what Surrealism suggested is that it wanted to destroy the sign itself. It wanted to it wanted to break away with the nature, the very nature of the sign itself. But Rollabat suggests that you cannot simply break away the sign. A clock still remains a clock. Whether it's melted, whether it's solid, whether it's showing time, whether it's not showing time, but a clock still remains a clock. So basically, what Salvador Dali was doing by making the clock seem very liquid was that Salvador Dali was hinting at something which is very interesting. That is, time is not frozen. Time is very liquid. Time is very fluid. Time is in a flux. And it is this sense of the flux which Dali was trying to capture in his painting. And this fluidity, this flux, is also one form of time. It might be psychological, it might be surreal, it might be something other than chronological time, but it is time nonetheless. So basically, surrealism, in its endeavor to break away from life, turns away from life actually. But absurdism, that is absurdity, that which is absurd, that kind of claims to be a reflection of life. For instance, absurdism found its best representation in the theater of the absurd. Uh, in the theater of the absurd, what happened was that uh, the theater of the absurd was actually one genre, which was very interesting, and it took its rightful place in the history of English literature. Actually, it was not properly English, it was French, Romanian, Spanish, and so on and so forth. Not properly English. But in any case, in the history of literature, absurdism took place after the Second World War. Though there were many, many earlier plays which can be called absurd. For instance, Ubu Roi by Alfred Jarry, that can be called absurd. Uh, Luigi Pirandello's Six Characters in Search of an Author, that can be called absurd to a certain degree. However, with Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, with uh, Eugene Ionescu's The Bald Prima Donna, with these plays, actually absurdism took its hold over the public conscience, over the public consciousness. So, in that absurdism, in the theater of the absurd is a way of uh, approaching life. It's a kind of representation of life on stage. Because absurdism understood that the life has become absurd after the Second World War. The universe, as we understand it, is absurd, and therefore uh, the play on stage must equally reciprocate the absurdity that is outside the theater. All right. So Shukumar Rai kind of, I would not call him an absurdist, but Shukumar Rai tried to capture the flavor of the absurd in his nonsense poetry. Right. Roy belongs to the rich heritage of the history of Bengali comic writers. If you look at the Bengal Renaissance, which took place during the British rule, then you will see that caricature, uh, comic, and these genres flourished to a great degree. And Roy was one of the greatest in this field. Now, Troilokanath Mukherjee was a noble predecessor of his. Sunirmal Bose, Annada Shankar Rai, Premendra Mitra are his subsequent writers in this genre. But along with Sukumar Rai, Abanindranath Tagore also participated in this uh, caricature, in this comic strips, and so on and so forth. If someday I have time, I'll talk a little bit about Abanindranath Tagore. I'll show you some slides of how Obun Thakur saw the uh, times. Even if you look at the Kalighat Potochitros that are available, there are some books also which are available on the Kalighat Potochitros. During the pandemic time, it is very difficult to go to College Street and get hold of those. But if you have time someday, I'm sure the pandemic will be over very soon. Uh, I hope at least. Let's not say I'm sure. But when it gets over, kindly go to College Street and go to the old bookshops. That is the bookshops which sell second-hand books. There, if you ask about, say, rare collections of Kalighat Potachitra and all, you might be lucky enough to find a book. All right. Now, there have been multiple attempts to kind of rationalize, to kind of theorize the field of nonsense. Okay. And one of these rationalizing theories is called Gestalt psychology. Now, Gestalt psychology believes that uh, the idea of nonsense is rooted in reality. And Roy's characters are taken from reality. His situations are taken from real life situations and then they are modified to that degree, they are magnified to that degree that they become something very heavy or something very hilarious. All right. Now, you will see that Roy makes a distinction between the visual society and the graphic culture. With the but this is not something which Roy was the first one to do. Uh, you see, with the British patronage, the academic art colleges flourished in Bombay and Calcutta in the 19th century. And there was a simultaneous boom in printing technology, which marked the juxtaposition of art and writing. All right, so along with writing, now we had some figures of art which regularly featured in these um, prints. All right. Now, Ramananda Chattopadhyay, who was a journalist, he was a pioneer in this stream, along with Ravi Burma and, as I have mentioned, Abon Thakur, Abanindranath Tagore. The Brahmo Society accepted and propagated this new development. All right. And in 1902, Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhuri, uh, he brought the ray tint process, which he used widely from the following year in printing illustrations alongside writings. So Upendra Kishore's uh, ray tint process, this allowed Upendra Kishore to kind of simultaneously write and uh, print small art figurines. Someday I'll just show you some figures by Upendra Kishore as well. If you have his complete works, the omnibus, Upendra Kishore Samagro, then there you will see that he has such brilliant uh, pieces. Now, by 1913, his own printing press was producing color blocks. All right. And he introduced the screen adjusting process. And his half-tone illustrations soon became very popular. Now, there is a person whose name is Shashi Hesh. He used it in his Puranic illustrations in Pradeep in 1901, and Ravi Burma also used it for his Sita in Pravasi in the same year, 1901. Now, Verma's illustration, woman playing Saravat in Pravasi in 1902, captured for the first time the soft tinges of oil painting using the ray tint process. Alright, so you see, there is a rich history behind this family of the rays. Now, look, if we focus a little bit on this thing, then we will see that this helped a lot in the case of the children's literature in Bengali and also in Bengal. Basically, the Brahmo Samaj became very, very active in this regard, and the Tattvabodhini Sabha in 1844 produced a Bengali spelling book, followed by primers such as Shishu Shikha, Shishu Bodh, and in 1855, and Vidyasagar also brought his Varna Porichaya. Now, Upendra Kishore used this technique in his very interesting books like Tuntunir Boi, Cheleদের Ramayon, Chotoদের Mahabharot, etc. And Sandesh, which was later very popular during Satyajit Ray's time, was based on the English magazine called Boy's Own Paper. Now, it changed the discourse of how we looked at the writings of the language of children's literature. For instance, if you look at Madan Mohan Torkalankar's children's literature, then you'll see Pakhi Shop, Pore Rob, Rapi Pokailo, Kanone Kusum Koli, Shokoli Putilo. So the birds are chirping and the night has gone. And in the garden, the flower buds have all started to bloom. Now he says this Pakhi Shop, Pore Rob, Rapi Pokailo, Kanone Kusum Koli, Shokoli Putilo. Now this is not very childlike. But what the rays introduced was a ray of hope, a ray of humor, observation, and most importantly, lithographs. Now, that was widely used in something which we Bengali children have grown up with, Thakur Mar Jhuli, Thakur Dada Jhuli, and so on and so forth. Now, nonsense came into being with something which was very interesting, which was called Nonsense Club. What is Nonsense Club? Now, after his magazine called Mukul, Sukumar Roy founded two literary societies. One was the Monday Club, which he used to call Monda Club. Monda is in a Bengali sweet. So Monda Club and Nonsense Club. Alright. During this time, Lokhoner Shoktishal, which was a very important, which depicts a very important event in the Ramayana, when Indrajit actually hurts Lakshman with a weapon called the Shoktishal. So that was presented in a very mock heroic tone, and this led to a humanization of the deity, and gods became suddenly middle class Bengalis. And with this, the foundations of Abol Tabol were set. But before I go into Abul Tabul, I would like to focus a little bit more on the cartoons and caricatures in India. Now, perhaps the earliest depiction of Buddha's temptation by Mara was at the shrine of Sachi. If you go there, you can find it. It's in UP, near Varanasi. It's a beautiful place. If you ever go there, you will see that it's a representative of a very different culture. Now, in Kolkata, we had the Kalighat pot, the Kalighat Potachitros, which are representative of that time. By 1850s, the British cartoonists were mocking the Raj in India. What is the Raj? The British Empire, the British colonial insistence on India is called the Raj. So by 1850s, the British cartoonists were mocking the Raj in India, such as Sir Charles Doyley in Tom Raw the Griffin in 1828. Also, the faux pas of an East India Company novice was kind of shown by this Tom Raw the Griffin. The Punch was published in various dialects, and Charles Philippons the Charivari became very, very famous during this time. Now, if you look at Cruikshank, Gilroy, uh, Rowlandson, and Tenney, they demolished the empire in their scathing art. And by the 1860s and 70s, the Indian Charivari, 1873 to be very precise, and the Delhi Sketchbook, which started from 1850, were busy critiquing India and the British from an Indian perspective. So this was something very new to India. Now, before I delve into the poems of Abol Tabul, I would like to deal with one last thing. That is, how can we group Abol Tabul? If you look at the syllabus, then you will see that we have a prescribed edition. The edition is by the edition is translated by none other than Satyajit Roy. Now there are other editions as well, like there is a very scholarly edition by Shukanta Chaudhuri, which comes from Oxford, but I would suggest you to follow the edition by Satyajit Roy. Okay, it's from Writer's Workshop. Now, if you focus, then you will see that you can group these poems in further distinction, in further deviations. For instance, Buddhadev Basu has divided the poems in three sections. Okay. First is human experiences exaggerated, such as if you focus on the poem like The Missing Whiskers, The Old Woodman, The Tickler, etc. Now, in these poems, there might be a secondary layer, but basically, these poems focus mostly on the rasa in the human experience. All right. The second one is the absurd. For instance, like It's Too Much, Uncle's Invention. In these, you see that Roy deliberately pushes the limits of the laws already existing. And by pushing the limits of the laws, Roy deliberately challenges our preconceptions of the world. And finally, the third kind is the poem of social critique. For instance, if you look at poems like The King of Bombardia, The Sons of Rangaru, Order in the Court, Baburam the Snake Charmer, Gloomy Tidings, etc. In these, Roy is very, very critical of the social evils, the malice, and those things which we have taken as commonplaces in the society, but which are very, very dangerous. So, Roy's social critique is also very, very scathing. Now, in this class, I would not want to go into the discussion of the poems, and hence I am keeping it brief because first you must understand the background on which Roy is writing, and in the next class, I would love to deal with uh, which poem? See the Missing Whiskers? We shall begin with that in the next poem. So, till the whiskers go missing, let's have a good day and let's have fun studying. All right. So please take care. Try to read the poem once, and we shall meet in the next class. So thank you so much, students.